Prepare for profound immersion, an extraordinary journey back to the dawn of existence to unravel a complete story of Adam and Eve, a narrative that pulsates with the grandeur of creation, the tragedy of disobedience, and the seeds of hope. This is not merely a legend, but the starting point of the Bible's history, a divine tapestry woven into the pages of the book of Genesis, revealing who we are, why we are here, and what our legacy is. Imagine, if you can, a universe in its infancy, still vibrating with the energy of its creation. Billions of newborn galaxies and stars spread across the cosmos, a spectacle of light and order that defies human comprehension. Amidst this vast and glorious cosmic landscape, a blue-green planet stood out. Earth, an oasis of life, carefully molded by a creator of limitless intelligence and power, awaited its grandest purpose. This planet was not an accident, nor a mere cluster of matter, but blank canvas of the divine masterpiece, designed to be a perfect home. Crystal-clear rivers snake through lush valleys, majestic mountains kiss the sky, and forests filled with vibrant colors and melodious sounds formed a garden of unparalleled delights. Every flower, every tree, every creature, from tiny insects to large mammals, displayed the perfection and harmony of divine design, operating in an impeccable and sustainable ecological balance. In the heart of this garden, its focal point, was Eden, an earthly paradise, a sanctuary of perfection, peace, and abundance, where life flourished without any stain of pain, sickness, aging, or imperfection. In this breathtaking setting, the Creator conceived his most sublime creation, humanity, who were Adam and Eve. They were the firstborn, the pioneers, the first representatives of a new form of life, the parents of every man and woman who has ever walked this earth. But they did not arise by chance, nor from the slow evolution of lower life forms. They were designed, conceived, and in an act of supreme love, created with a specific and glorious purpose that far transcended mere biological existence. How did they come into being? The Creator, in his magnificence and with a care bordering on art, knelt over the dust of Eden's soil, not carelessly or hastily, like an impatient sculptor, but with the meticulous attention of an artist, with the precision of an unparalleled biological engineer, with the passion of a father creating his child. From this earth, he molded the form of a man, every muscle, every bone, every curve of the human body, with incomparable anatomical perfection. His internal organs functioned flawlessly, his systems were efficient, and his structure was capable of enduring millennia without aging, without deteriorating, without succumbing to any ailment. And then, in a moment of pure divine magic, of a touch of life that transcends all human comprehension, he breathed the breath of life into the nostrils of that inert form. Adam, the first man, opened his eyes to an immaculate world with a clear mind, capable of deep reasoning, quick learning, avid absorption of knowledge, and crystal-clear memory. His body was robust, his health perfect, his energy inexhaustible, and his heart overflowed with gratitude and reverence for his Creator. He was not a primitive being, devoid of intellect or sensibility, but the pinnacle of earthly creation, endowed with superior intelligence, unlimited creativity, and most importantly, the ability to communicate directly with his Creator unfiltered, without intermediaries, in a conversation that would be both educational and affectionate. His life would be a constant learning, a continuous joy, and an unlimited expansion of his potential. Why did they come into being? Adam's purpose was as grand as a creation. He was not made to be a mere passive inhabitant of Eden, but a vice-regent, a royal gardener, an administrator endowed with authority and responsibility over all earthly creation. His mission was to care for and cultivate Eden, unraveling its secrets, nurturing its beauty, naming its plants and animals, and crucially, expanding its boundaries across the entire earth, transforming the entire planet into a global paradise, a magnificent reflection of the original Eden. He was to be the perfect administrator, enjoying an eternal
We are
life,
the guardians of the
full
light,
of meaningful purpose,
the protectors
unlimited
of the
knowledge, and
innocent.
uninterrupted communion with his Creator. His mind was so sharp that he was able to observe, analyze, and name every living creature, a task requiring monumental intellectual capacity, profound discernment, and practical wisdom, demonstrating his intelligent supremacy over all animal life. He felt deep joy in his work, satisfaction in his communion, and an undisturbed peace in his existence. However, the Creator observed something missing, even in the perfection of Eden. "It is not good for man to be alone," he declared. Life, even in paradise, lacked an intimate partnership, a mirror for the soul, a counterpart who could fully share the human experience, its joys and challenges, its discoveries and its deepest thoughts. Adam needed someone who was his equal, his helper, his companion in life and purpose. And so, while Adam slept a deep, divine sleep, perhaps the first deep sleep of existence, a blessed and carefree rest, the Creator performed another marvel of biological engineering and divine love. From Adam's side, from an intimate and central piece of his being, he formed the woman. She was not created to be inferior, nor to be dominant. She was not taken from his head to rule over him, nor from his feet to be trampled upon, but from his side, from his heart, to be his companion, his equal, his perfect helper, someone who would complement him in all aspects, in thought, feeling, and action. And when Adam awoke and saw her for the first time, his heart overflowed with even deeper joy than he felt upon awakening to life. He immediately recognized her as part of himself. "This, at last, is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." Eve, the first woman, was the expression of divine beauty and grace, Adam's perfect counterpart, completing the Creator's image on earth and inaugurating the institution of marriage as a sacred and perfect bond, made to last eternally. They lived in total innocence, without shame, without guilt, without fear, like pure and harmless children, but with the intelligence and capacity of adults. Their relationship with the Creator was one of intimacy and absolute trust, without a shadow of doubt or distrust. He walked with them in the garden, in the cool of the day, in moment of communion and teaching, revealing the mysteries of life, sharing his wisdom about creation, about the universe, about the laws governing existence and harmony. It was a relationship of pure love, of a father with his perfect children, without any barrier or veil, a direct and constant communion, full of affection. Each day, they grew in knowledge, appreciation, and love for the one who had given them everything, fully enjoying every gift. Eden was a feast of the senses, a symphony of perfection. Every tree produced delicious fruits of all shapes, sizes, and flavors, in vibrant colors and intoxicating perfumes, freely available for the couple's delight. Life was a constant celebration, a hymn to perfection and abundance. However, amidst this perfection, there was a single restriction, a single clear and unequivocal commandment. In the center of the garden, in a prominent place, stood the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The Creator had told Adam, and Adam, in turn, had faithfully conveyed to Eve the divine instruction, as recorded in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it you will certainly die." This was not an arbitrary rule, a divine whim to test their submission without purpose. Far from it. It was a manifestation of love, a fundamental lesson about divine sovereignty, and the recognition that the Creator is the source of all true goodness, wisdom, and morality. The Creator was giving them a chance to demonstrate their love and loyalty through obedience to a single, simple command. The tree represented the Creator's exclusive right to determine what was right and wrong for his creatures, to define what is good and what is evil for them. By respecting this single prohibition, Adam and Eve would humbly acknowledge that their limits of knowledge and discernment were inferior to their Creator's, that he knew what was best for them, protecting them from painful experiences and terrible consequences. It was a test for their loyalty to come from a heart that chose to obey out of love and gratitude, and not out of imposition or fear. It was a chance to solidify unbreakable trust, to prove they valued their relationship with the one who had given them life. It was the only way they could truly have free will, for without a choice, obedience would not be genuine love, but merely automatic programming, the essence of disobedience. Think for a moment. How often today do we encounter rules or principles that seem arbitrary or restrictive? Traffic laws, professional codes of ethics, even health advice. We tend to question them, to doubt their goodness, seeking a freedom that often proves to be a path to danger. Adam and Eve's disobedience was not just an act against a fruit, but a declaration of independence from the Creator, a belief that they could know what was best for themselves. It is no different from when we ignore a medical warning for a momentary pleasure, or break a law for personal gain. The essence is the same, the arrogant belief that we are the final authority in our lives. But paradise, however perfect, was not immune to a threat that came not from within, but from without, from an invisible realm. There was a spiritual creature of immense power and intelligence who did not accept the role given to him in the divine arrangement. This being, an angel of great beauty and ability, whom the Bible later identifies as Satan or the devil, had become selfish, proud, and envious of the Creator's glory. He wished to be worshipped and wanted to challenge supreme authority, usurping the Creator's place and becoming a god unto himself. He saw in Adam and Eve an opportunity to prove that the Creator had failed, that humanity, if left to its own devices, would fail to obey, and that the Creator did not deserve loyalty or the love of his creatures. He did not appear openly in his glorious form, as that might alert and frighten them, but chose a cunning trick, using a real serpent, an animal known for its astuteness, silent movements, and ability to hide well, as his mouthpiece in disguise, camouflaging his true identity and malicious intent, hoping to deceive. And so, the tragedy began. The serpent, inhabited and moved by this invisible adversary, approached Eve, not with a direct threat, nor violence, but with a subtle question that sowed doubt, an insidious poison that attacked trust, as recorded in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 1. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? He distorted the Creator's truth, exaggerating the prohibition to make the Creator seem petty, jealous, selfish, withholding something good, something essential and vital from them. He insinuated that the Creator was afraid that they would become like him, knowing good and evil for themselves, without depending on him, independent of his guidance. "You will not certainly die," the deceiver boldly and falsely guaranteed, flagrantly contradicting the Creator's word, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 4. He promised a freedom and wisdom that would, in fact, lead to the deepest slavery, death, and misery. He promised divinity, delivering ruin, the subtlety of temptation, and doubt. The devil came not with a sword, but with a question. He planted the seed of doubt. Today, we are bombarded with information that constantly makes us doubt what is right, what is true. Media, social networks, seemingly trustworthy voices, all can subtly lead us to question solid principles, distort facts, and make us doubt the goodness of others or even our own Creator. Be careful with questions that seek to undermine your trust in established truths. Ask yourself, what is the source of this doubt? What are the intentions behind it? Eve, with her perfect mind, yet inexperienced in evil, having never known lies, malice, or deception, heard the seductive words. She saw the forbidden tree, and now, under the influence of temptation and the seed of doubt planted in her mind, the fruit that was once just a restriction now seemed more desirable than ever, not for the intrinsic beauty of the fruit, which was a divine gift, but for the seductive promise of superior knowledge, of independence from the Creator, of equality with him, of becoming like God. The doubt planted by the adversary began to germinate and blossom in her heart and mind. She reasoned with herself, weighed the Creator's word against the tempters, and sadly, tragically, chose to believe the lie, succumbing to temptation. She reached out, took the fruit, and ate it, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 6, savoring not just the pulp, but the illusory idea of freedom and power that the adversary had promised, a freedom that, in reality, was slavery, the alluring illusion of independence. Eve was seduced by the idea of being like God, of having her own knowledge of good and evil. This pursuit of absolute independence, of being her own God, echoes in our days. We see it in the rejection of any form of authority, in the unrestrained pursuit of autonomy, without responsibility, in the belief that I know what's best for me, even when it goes against all logic and experience. This is a trap of thinking that true freedom lies in ignoring all rules, when in fact, rules, when just and wise, protect us and free us to prosper. What did they do? Eve ate, and then, in a gesture that would seal the fate of all humanity, she took the fruit to Adam. It is crucial to understand a point that is often misinterpreted in the Bible story. The sin was not sex. Sex, within the bonds of marriage, was a divine gift, a sacred part of the Creator's plan for procreation and pleasurable union between man and woman, a reflection of divine love and the ability to create life. The fruit itself had no magical power. It was just a literal common fruit, And to dispel the myth of the forbidden fruit, which the Bible does not specify, it is true that the scriptures do not specify what kind of fruit it was. It was not a specific apple, pomegranate, or figure. The idea of the apple became popular in Western tradition, perhaps due to its image in the Latin word malum, which means both apple and evil. But the type of fruit is irrelevant to the narrative. What mattered was the explicit and clear prohibition and what it represented. The Creator's right to set the standard for good and evil. The true sin was not the fruit, nor sex, but disobedience, the conscious and deliberate rebellion against the Creator's authority and goodness. Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, persuaded by a lie that made her doubt God's goodness. But Adam, the Bible is clear in stating that Adam was not deceived. He knew exactly what he was doing, understanding the consequences of his choice. He made a conscious and deliberate choice to join Eve in her transgression, perhaps out of misguided love for his wife, not wanting to lose her or be alone in a perfect world without her, or preferring his wife's company and her acceptance over loyalty and obedience to his Creator. He made a monumental choice, turning his back on the source of all life, goodness, truth, and wisdom. And so, he also ate, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 6. The act of eating the fruit became the symbol of his declared independence from his Creator, an affirmation that he himself would decide what was good and what was evil, assuming a right that belonged only to the Creator. The responsibility of choice and complicity. Adam's attitude is even more serious, as he was not deceived. He chose to disobey. This teaches us that often it is not ignorance, but moral weakness or the desire to please others or oneself that leads us to transgress. In a relationship or even in a social group, pressure or solidarity with another's wrong can lead us to act against our own conscience and against what we know to be right. Complicity in disobedience carries a terrible weight. The consequences of their actions were immediate, profound, and devastating, affecting not only them, but all their future offspring and the entire planet. Their eyes were opened not to the promised divine wisdom, but to the raw perception of their own guilt and shame. For the first time, they felt naked, not just physically, but morally and spiritually, exposed in their disobedience and separated from the holiness of their Creator. They tried to cover themselves with fig leaves, a pathetic and useless gesture that revealed the loss of innocence and the rise of guilt and fear in their souls, as described in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 7. The illusion of hiding from error. Adam and Eve's first reaction to sinning was to try to cover their nakedness and hide. How often do we try to hide our mistakes, our failures, our shame? We blame others, minimize the situation, use flimsy excuses. This need to cover up and hide is a universal human reaction to error, a futile attempt to avoid truth and responsibility. But the truth always finds a way to surface. When they heard the voice of the Creator walking in the garden in the cool of the day, a place that was once one of joyful, intimate communion, where the divine presence was a source of comfort and joy, it now became a place of terror and apprehension. They had behind the trees, an unthinkable action before, demonstrating the irreparable breaking of their perfect relationship with the one who loved them deeply. The Creator, in his justice, which demands that the law be fulfilled, had confronted them. He did not abandon them, but called them to account, giving them the opportunity to admit their mistake. And the scene unfolded. The Creator asked about what happened, and Adam, instead of taking responsibility, blamed Eve. "The woman you put here with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 12. Eve, in turn, blamed the serpent. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 13. Responsibility was thrown back and forth, revealing the first fruit of imperfection, the human tendency to avoid blame and to justify one's own mistakes instead of owning up to transgressions. The blame game. Adam and Eve's immediate tendency was to blame each other, and then the serpent. This blame game is a universal reflection of fallen human nature. Rarely does anyone take full responsibility for a mistake. There is always a justification, an external factor, another culprit. This lack of self-examination and honesty is a barrier to true reconciliation and change. When we refuse to take blame, we deny ourselves the opportunity to learn and grow. The divine sentences were pronounced, echoing throughout Eden. sealing the fate of humanity and the planet. For the adversary, the serpent, the rebellious angel who used it, a condemnation of degradation and a prophecy of future destruction, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. A first spark of hope amidst misfortune, the promise that evil would not prevail forever, and that there would be a rescuer coming from humanity. For Eve, multiplied pain in childbirth, what would once have been pure joy and suffering-free, would now be accompanied by great physical and emotional suffering, and a new dynamic in the relationship with Adam. The husband would rule over her, not as an original divine ideal of equality and partnership, but as a sad consequence of human imperfection and the loss of perfect harmony between them, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 16. For Adam, the curse of the soil, which once produced in abundance and effortlessly, would now be thorny, producing weeds and thistles. He would work with arduous effort, with the sweat of his brow, to earn his livelihood from the land that should have been his ally. And the cruelest of sentences, the one that most contradicted his perfect nature and initial purpose. For dust you are, and to dust you will return, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 19. Death, which was once an impossibility, a strange and non-existent concept in paradise, became the inevitable reality for him and all his descendants. They had died spiritually on the day they ate, losing their vital relationship with the Creator, and now physical death will begin its slow and cruel work, marking the end of a perfect earthly existence. They were expelled from Eden, not merely as an implacable punishment, but as an act of mercy and preservation. The Creator, in his wisdom and justice, did not want them to eat from the tree of life and live forever in their state of imperfection and sin, eternally prolonging suffering and rebellion. Cherubim, powerful angels, with flaming swords that continually turned, were placed to guard the way back to the lost paradise, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 24, ensuring that imperfection could not contaminate the sanctity of eternal life, and that the plan of redemption could proceed without interference. The irreversible consequences of breaking covenants. The expulsion from Eden is the ultimate symbol of the consequences of breaking a covenant. When we break trust in a relationship or disobey fundamental principles, the consequences are not just immediate. They can forever alter the course of our lives and those around us. One wrong decision can close doors that may never open again, change the environment we live in, and even redefine who we are. Think about how betrayal or a disastrous financial decision can change a family's life forever. Life outside Eden, a shocking reality. From that fateful day, the world changed forever, and Adam and Eve were the first to feel the weight of this transformation. The gate of paradise closed behind them, never to open again. They, who had lived in a garden of delights, where food sprouted effortlessly and life was a song of joy, now found themselves in a hostile and unknown environment. Perfection disappeared, replaced by a relentless cycle of life and death, sickness and aging, hardship and suffering. The land, which was once fertile and generous, now refused to yield its fruits without a struggle. Adam, with hands that once delicately tended Eden's plants, now had to dig, plow, sow, and harvest under an inclement sun, with sweat pouring down his face. Thorns and thistles sprouted incessantly, making every step and every effort a battle. Hunger and exhaustion became his companions. It was a brutal contrast to the effortless abundance of paradise. For Eve, the promise of pain in childbirth became an agonizing reality. Each birth was an event of intense suffering, a poignant reminder of her disobedience. But despite the pain, they persevered and began to bring forth humanity. Their first children were Cain and Abel. The first generation born outside of paradise already carried the weight of inherited imperfection, the stain of original disobedience, the innate tendency to error that would come to haunt the human family. The lives of Cain and Abel reflected the new reality. Cain, a tiller of the soil, struggled against the cursed ground. Abel, a shepherd, depended on the lives of animals. Both made offerings to the Creator, perhaps seeking a form of redemption or to reestablish some lost connection. But imperfection had already corroded their hearts. It wasn't long before violence and cruelty erupted in the human family. Cain, Overcome by jealousy and rage, seeing that his brother Abel's offering was accepted and his own was not, perhaps due to an impure heart or a wrong attitude, committed the most shocking act. He murdered his own brother, as per the book of Genesis, chapter 4, verse 8. This was the first murder in human history, a horrific echo of the original disobedience. The stain of sin spread like a plague, corrupting human nature, family relationships, and the environment itself. Adam and Eve witnessed the most devastating consequence of their choice, the death not only of themselves, but of their own son at the hands of another son. The pain of loss, the guilt for their actions, the remorse for having brought humanity to this point of degradation, must have been unbearable. Cain was cursed and banished, becoming a wanderer on the earth. Imperfection breeding more imperfection. The story of Cain and Abel is a painful reminder of how imperfection, once established, tends to propagate and intensify. The seed of disobedience germinated in the form of jealousy, rage, and finally,
are the guardians of the light.
Our imperfect choices today do not just affect ourselves, but create an environment, a legacy, that can lead future generations down even darker paths. The violence we see in the world, injustice, greed, all are an amplified echo of that first disobedience in the garden. Despite the excruciating pain and loss, Adam and Eve continue to have sons and daughters. The Bible mentions Seth, who was born in his own likeness, in his own image, but now it was a likeness and image of an imperfect Adam. The human lineage multiplied, but with it, imperfection, disease, aging, and death became the norm. Adam and Eve lived for many centuries, witnessing the growth of their vast family, but also the increasing wickedness of humanity. Every wrinkle on their faces, every ache in their bodies, every loss they experienced was a constant reminder of paradise lost and the price of their disobedience. They bore the burden of being the only ones to remember perfection, direct communion with the Creator, Eden. This memory must have been both a blessing and a curse, a constant reminder of what had been lost and what could have been. Their death, many centuries later, was the final fulfillment of the sentence. From dust you came, and to dust you will return. They returned to the dust of the earth from which they were formed, undeniable proof that the wages of sin is death, as per Romans chapter 6, verse 23. But even amidst the pain and loss, there was a small flame of hope that the Creator had planted with his first prophecy, the promise of an offspring who would one day crush the serpent's head, correcting everything Adam and Eve had spoiled. This promise, passed down from generation to generation, was their only comfort, the only light in the darkness, the weight of memory and legacy. Adam and Eve lived for centuries with a vivid memory of what they lost. They were the only ones to have known perfection, and, by their own choice, to have lost it. This gave them a unique perspective on life, death, and choices. Today, the legacy of their actions still affects us. Our choices, in turn, also create a legacy for the future. What kind of memories and legacies are we creating for those who will come after us? Are we building or destroying? Who are we before them? According to the Bible, we are undeniably their direct descendants. This means we are born with an undeniable inheritance. Imperfection, the inclination to error, and the inevitable journey to death. The Bible story teaches us a fundamental principle. Just as a perfect mold can only produce perfect copies, a mold that has been damaged or altered, becoming imperfect, can only produce imperfect copies. Adam, once perfect, became imperfect through his act of disobedience. And, as an imperfect mold, he could only produce imperfect children who would inherit this imperfection, this birth defect, this tendency to error. It is not that we are guilty of Adam's sin itself. The Bible teaches us that each will be judged by their own actions, and that the wages of sin is death. But we are born with an innate inclination to sin, a tendency to err, an inherited imperfection that leads us to death, an inevitable fate without divine intervention. It is like a genetic flaw transmitted from generation to generation, a hereditary disease that affects all human descendants, making us susceptible to errors, failures, and death. We were not condemned for something we did not do, but we are born into a condition of imperfection that separates us from divine perfection and makes us mortal and subject to suffering. What legacy did they leave us? The legacy is complex, multifaceted. On one hand, We inherited suffering, physical and emotional pain, sickness, inexorable aging, death, and the constant struggle against our own weaknesses and the imperfect nature of the world around us. We experienced the frustration of arduous work, the grief of losing loved ones, social injustice, natural disasters, and the inherent imperfection of human life around us. But, on the other hand, and this is a crucial point, we also inherited the intrinsic capacity to love deeply, to feel compassion, to be creative, to seek truth and justice, to have faith and hope, to strive for a better world, to cling to life and the beauty that still exists. More importantly, we inherited the promise, that prophecy of the woman's offspring, who would one day crush the serpent's head, correcting everything Adam and Eve had spoiled. This is the basis of all hope for humanity. The promise of a rescue, a complete restoration. How did the Creator create them, and what was His purpose? He created them perfect, with an eternal purpose to live in harmony with Him and with each other, expanding paradise across the entire earth and living forever in happiness and peace. Sin did not alter the Creator's original purpose. It only delayed His fulfillment. He did not abandon His creation, nor humanity. His love is so profound that He immediately began to work on a plan of rescue, a way to fulfill His promise of a restored paradise, which will extend across the entire earth and last forever. He does not renege on His promises. On the contrary, He works tirelessly through history to fulfill them. What was the Creator's relationship with them, and what changed? His relationship was that of a loving father to beloved children, of a wise teacher to dedicated students, of a Creator who delighted in His creation and in their company. There was intimacy, total trust, and direct communication face to face, so to speak, without any need for mediators or ceremonies. What changed was the breaking of that trust and obedience. Disobedience created an insurmountable barrier, a distance between divine holiness and perfection and human imperfection, now stained by sin. The perfection of the relationship was marred by guilt and shame. The intimacy that allowed daily walks and frank conversations was lost, replaced by the need for faith, prayer, and, eventually, a complex plan of redemption that would involve sacrifices and, finally, the sacrifice of a divinely appointed Redeemer. The pain the Creator must have felt seeing His perfect children stray from His path and suffer the consequences of their choices must have been immense, almost like a father watching his children go down a path of destruction. But even in this new and sad reality, the Creator showed His love by providing clothes for them, a practical act of care and dignity. And more importantly, the promise of a future rescue, proof that He would never give up on His purpose for humanity and the planet, because of His unwavering love. The unwavering love of the Creator and the promise of redemption. Despite the disobedience and all its terrible consequences, the Creator did not abandon Adam and Eve. He provided them with clothes, a prophecy of hope, and a plan of rescue. This shows us that, even in the face of our greatest failures and disobediences, the Creator's love and mercy are not exhausted.
We are the guardians
He continues
of the
to work
light,
for a greater purpose,
the protectors of
seeking
the
the
innocent.
restoration and redemption of His creation. The story of Adam and Eve is, ultimately, a story of unbreakable hope.